And good afternoon. I see we have several people in the chat bar. It's Dr. Roddenberry coming to you live from Willow Springs, North Carolina. Hello, Melissa. Hello, Jenna. And hello, I would probably say Sandeep, if I'm guessing who else is in the audience. I'd like to thank everybody who came to today's lecture. How are you doing? For those of you who are watching this live, the weather is wonderful outside, isn't it, Melissa? If you happen to be watching this recorded broadcast in December or February, you'll be complaining. But yes, I'm doing well, thanks. Things are going all right. Good deal. Glad to see you, Jenna. I just finished grading writing assignments and handing the grades back, so you should take a look at those. I know, right? Good deal. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started today. So today we're talking about the parts of the psychology book that help you live the best possible life. So we all talk about living your best life. Psychology has something to say about that. So today we're going to see what psychology has to say about you being healthy and happy. Okay, so let's go ahead. The first thing I'd like to do is tell you that trying to live the good life is not a new idea. Although we talk about living the good life, living my best life as if it's some sort of new invention of the 21st century. This is in fact not true. The philosophy of living well is incredibly old. It goes back thousands and thousands of years to the Upanishads, to Confucianism, the Nicomachean ethics. Islamism even has statements on how to live the good life. In fact, if you want to know the truth, you can look down here and see that Tony Robbins, the famous motivational speaker, and my grandma both have wonderful things to say about living your best life. In fact, my Nana, who lived to be 101, had some rules that she thought would help you live a happy life. And you know what? This lady actually drove her own car from her own house to her 99th birthday. So you can't argue with Nana's rules for living. And you know what? I've also got a link this week in the course resources materials from Dan Gilbert about happiness. And so Dan Gilbert is a positive psychologist. He studies what makes people happy, and he did some research about the 3 most important things in life. So you should check that out. Yes, Nana was definitely a force of nature. She was even volunteering in the retirement center up until she was 90, and she used to tell us that I like to do that because I want to help the old people. Nana was something else, and I'm really proud to show her picture and talk about her philosophies for living. Because frankly, I think she did a lot of the things intuitively correct that I'm going to talk to you that are put into a textbook. So you should really take heed to those people who've lived a long time. Obviously, they know what they're doing, right? So what we're talking about today is well-being. Now, when most people think about living a good life, all they think about is their physical health. But that's just one part of what it means to have well-being. We're also talking about being happy, not being depressed, right? Being engaged with life, that is, having something to do that makes you feel useful, and also being able to find meaning and value in life. And so there are a lot of things that go into what we call well-being. And when we talk about the effects that well-being can have on your life's outcomes, you need to think about all these things. It's not just a dollar number, it's something else too. The dollar is very important, but something else is important too. Now, one of the things I want you to know is that this well-being is actually associated with a stronger immunity. That is, you're going to be able to protect yourself from illnesses. You're not going to get sick as much. you're going to be happier, and you're going to wind up living a longer life. So that's why we're interested in this. Now, there's a professional group of psychologists. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the class that there were different professional specialties. Remember, I am a social psychologist. I'm an expert on social pressure. Clinical psychologists are experts in treating psychological disorders. There's two groups of psychologists who are interested in this notion of well-being. And the first group is the positive psychologists, and the second group are health psychologists. These are two different groups of people. Your positive psychologists are going to be more of your researchers. These are the people that you're going to find on your college campus doing experimental studies or doing the research, trying to find the links between these aspects of well-being and our health outcomes. Those are going to be the researchers. So when I tell you that well-being is associated with stronger immunity, fewer illnesses, and a longer life, that information has come from the branch of psychology we call positive psychology. Now, there's a second discipline related to this area, and this is called health psychology. And health psychology is an applied area. These experts know the research inside and out. They read the positive psych research, they read the medical journals, they know everything about these outcomes, and these people are the ones who are in charge of actually helping people live happier, healthier lives. So if you are trying to quit an addicting habit, you might be seeing a behavioral or a health psychologist. If you are trying to lose weight, if you're trying to do any of these change any of these number of problematic behaviors or develop into a healthier self, you may see a health psychologist whose job is to help you develop the habits that will lead you to health and well-being. Yes, the research suggests that these sort of, and nobody's really done the research and looked at all four of these things, but there are definitely studies that show that people who have a sense of spirituality and have a sense of meaning in life live longer. Then there's other research which talks about having a job and having activities that's being engaged in life. So each and every one of these things are associated with with a lower incidence of these negative outcomes. So yes, Nelisa, having someone, did you know, Nelisa, that being married actually has huge positive health benefits? Now, I'm not trying to be old-fashioned here or tell you what you have to do, but the data actually suggests that those people who are married live longer and have fewer health outcomes. Are there more stress and anxiety? Yes, yes. And actually, Nelisa, we're going to talk about stress specifically on the next lecture. That's living your best life 2. Living your best life 1, I'm just going to talk about some general aspects and sort of introduce the field. Wow. Ironically enough, David, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's better than divorced or never partnered people, but for somewhere, and nobody can explain why. Nobody can explain why. This is why you don't want to say that being married causes it. It seems to be associated with it. But for some reason, the best outcomes tend to be associated with people who have that stupid piece of paper. Go figure, right? I know it is kind of cool, right? So romantic. The hopeful romantic in me loves that aspect, Melissa. But the bottom line is that psychology does have some insight into the kinds of mental and psychological and cognitive things that can really affect the length of our life. Do you think it's the mindset that you're married? I would just be guessing and throwing my opinion out there, David. Uh, but there's something about security and comfort. Uh, I think that people like. Now, when you've been dating someone for 20 or 30 years, maybe there's something about community sanctioning. Maybe there's some sort of added benefit of community sanctioning. I think so. And if that makes you interested, you folks should follow that as a research interest. So if you find that interesting, David and Elisa, you seem to be very interested in that. If you find that interesting, I can help you look up more information on that, and maybe you can start to become experts on the link between marriage and well-being. Okay. Now, as I said, today's lecture is going to is going to talk about some of the more general aspects of of health. We're going to talk about weight and eating right and exercise and all that. Now, I'm not going to give you too much advice here. Now, if you want, when we talk in our webinar, our weekly webinar, I can tell you about my own attempts to get healthy. And so we can talk about specific behaviors, but I'm not really going here to preach to you about what to do with your weight or your smoking, etc. I'm just going to tell you what we do know about it. You do know that obesity is a growing problem in the U.S. Obesity rates are just doubling. They are absolutely blowing up. Now, one of the things that I remember growing up, I was born in 1969, so I lived in the 70s. One of the things that I remember eating out was a luxury. We never got to eat out. If you got to eat out once or twice a month, it probably meant that your family was doing pretty well. We all ate home cooked meals, and portions are incredibly huge now. One of the things that really turns me off about going to fast food restaurants anymore is you can't get a regular size soda. They want to hand you that 32-ounce behemoth every time. Do you have any idea how many calories and how much sugar is in a sweet tea, a large sweet tea from McDonald's? It would shock you, right? And so the thing that that the research seems to bear out, that was borne out in my experience, was the variety of foods and the portion sizes have really, really changed, and it's kind of caused everybody to overeat and really blow up our weight. Obesity rates are up 400%. There used to be, when I grew up, there were hardly any kids that were overweight. Now I umpire in a baseball league, and half of the little ball players are around, frankly. Yes, 400%. That means there's 4 times as many. If 5% of the kids were obese in 1960, 20% would be a 400% increase. So yeah, whatever that base number was, if it was 3% in 1960, it's now 12%. If it was 8%, it's now 32%, 400%. And so this is really something that you and we all need to get a handle on. Yeah, 400% just means it quadruples the initial percentage remark, right? Cultural factors. So we do know the research does suggest that there's tends. Remember we talked about nature and nurture the entire semester. In fact, your last writing assignment had some nature and nurture in it. Friends tend to be similar in BMI, even if they don't live near one another, which suggests sort of a nurture link. But one of the things you're going to see, adoption studies in BMI and twin studies in BMI show that there is also a strong genetic link as well. And so what we know is that, there are some environmental forces that do affect the way we eat, but people are born sometimes with sort of a genetic tendency towards a given weight. Now, some people talk about this thing called set point theory, and they argue, hey, the reason some people can't lose weight is because their body is set at a certain weight. So your body wants a certain level of fat percentage. And what they say is that if these people try to lose weight, then their body changes its metabolism to work against that change of the set point. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to lose weight, but it is incredibly difficult. So some people feel almost as if your weight is set in stone. Now, this is in fact, I don't know, like I'm down 36 pounds. Fantastic, David. You should be absolutely proud of yourself. Folks, celebrate this guy right here. That is a ton of freaking weight. How much are you looking to lose, Dave? Now, you folks may not know this, but I really let myself get out of control in my 30s and 40s when I had kids. I quit exercising. I started eating and drinking a ton of beer. And I was up, okay, fantastic. Dave, you should look at me. I was 206 when I started trying to lose weight. I was 5'6", 206. The doctor was wanting to put me on all kinds of medicines. I had high cholesterol, I had high blood pressure, I had high blood sugar, and the doctor wanted to put me on all these medicines. But I asked him if there was an option, and he said, yes, you can lose weight. And David, I went down from 206 to 156. I lost 50 pounds. You know what? I went back to the doctor 6 months later. My blood sugar was straight, my cholesterol level was straight, and my blood pressure was great. You can do it. But one of the things you folks don't realize is that David has done the hard work. It's getting started. The belief, most people don't believe they can do it. They use this set point theory, but you can do it. It sucks. There's no fun way around it. You definitely have to restrict calories, and you have to get used to this weird feeling that people in the Western world don't appreciate, and that's the feeling of hunger, right? Most people feel hunger and they get sad. But if you really want to lose weight, hunger means you're winning. So when I was losing my 50 pounds, just like David's going to do himself, when I felt hunger, instead of getting sad, I would start laughing because that meant that I was eating my body. I was winning the race, right? But it's a grind. There is nothing sexy or fun about it. And most people look for a grapefruit or some sort of powder or some sort of magical timing diet. It's really a mathematical equation, baby. Calories going in must be less than calories going out for a certain length of time. It didn't, it took me 30 years to become obese. And let me see, I'm 5'6", and I was 205. So I had a BMI of about 32, if you look down here. And what we know is that BMI times 15, your body weight times 15, find out your maintenance calories. There you go. Nice. See, Dave's already got it down to a science. You really have to get focused on the end goal. Now, the weird thing is, I've noticed since I lost 50 pounds, people talk to me a little bit nicer. Ladies my age now smile at me and start conversations. Really weird. I hate to say it, but there's a certain amount of social acceptance issues that having a little too much weight are going to be associated with. People who are suffering from obesity, they have higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, and when measured, their self-esteem tends to be lower. So there's some psychological negatives going on with being overweight. And obesity and physical health. Obesity is associated with an increase in many health risks. I have a good friend, a dear friend, who died at 56 last year. In fact, this Thursday will be the 1-year anniversary of his death. Pete. and Pete was very obese, and he died from lung cancer. Never smoked a single cigarette in his life, but was really heavy. And what we know is that these negative, unlucky kinds of things, getting cancer, having a heart attack, having a stroke, they're more likely to occur if your BMI is over 30. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you not to worry too much about BMI. BMI underrepresents people who have a lot of muscle. This is true. And so, if it's the difference between a BMI of 21 and a 22, I agree with these people. But if your BMI is 32, 33, it's time. It's time to live a healthier life, and you can do it. I swear to God, you can do it. I love strength training more, cardio more often. You know what? Here's the crazy thing, though, Melissa. Strength training is important too. In fact, as you get older, mobility problems, injuries, other difficulties that start to bring people down in late adulthood can be reversed or prevented if you engage in the weightlifting. And you know what, Melissa? When you're pumping out that weight, your heart's up there. You know what I mean? If you're breaking out a sweat, you're getting that heart rate up, Melissa. So you shouldn't worry about that. Yeah, it was kind of sucky to see Pete die that way. And I've got another friend who smoked his whole life. I've known him since he was 20, and he is close to death from lung cancer as well. So, you know, all of these negative things that I'm talking about over the next couple of slides, it's real easy to say I'm young and I don't feel it yet. But I'm starting to lose quite a few friends in the 50s now. And I'm noticing that a lot of them tended to have habits that weren't so healthy. Those kinds of habits that I'm telling you to lose right now. But that's up to you. Now, on the other hand, there are people who have problems the other way. Crazy thing is, in a country with so much obesity, we've also have people who have difficulty maintaining a healthy weight. I actually know someone suffering from this right now. And the weird thing is, your image. I don't know if you remember when we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we talked about perception and everything is kind of an illusion. So your brain is creating the hallucination that you see. It's creating a sense of reality. And I suggested to you, especially when we talked about Ben Underwood, the blind boy who sees with his ears, I suggested to you that really it's not so much what the reality is, but how your body interprets that reality. And just as everything else you may look at in the world is your interpretation of the world, people also interpret their own body. So when I look in the mirror, there's a certain set of visual inputs that come into my eyes, but I have to interpret what I see. And there are people who have what's called body dysmorphic disorder. When they look in the mirror, they see something wrong. They see something that they hate. And this causes a neurotic problem in their mind, which causes them to engage in compulsive behaviors, maybe compulsive dieting, maybe compulsive vomiting. Did you know that there are some people who feel like their arm is actually not their arm? And there are people who mangle themselves in an attempt to get a body part off of them because they don't think that body part exists, right? Body dysmorphia, yes. Now, the point I'm saying is that your image, a lot of the you, when we talk about the self-concept, who you are, a lot of that is not necessarily dependent upon reality. Sometimes we imagine things. And there are people who have disorders. Typically, these are females, although not always. Typically, these females come from very affluent and very accomplished families. But there are people who have body image problems that lead them to engage in calorie consumption problems. And you've heard of anorexia nervosa. This is where the person refuses to eat because when they look in the mirror, they see an overweight person. All right. There is also anorexia bulimia, where the person doesn't necessarily constrain themselves from eating calories, but they then follow the eating period with a compulsive vomiting period. So again, we have this idea these people have these guilt and these feelings wrapped up when it comes to food and calories and their body image. And then there are some people who overeat emotionally, and we call this binge eating disorders, right? And these people are different from anorexics because they're not the kind of people who are constricting the calories, but they're eating emotionally. And you know what? You're actually going to see this more often in men. And of course, as you might expect, news flash from the obvious department, binge eaters tend to be more obese. So not only do we have problems, we have to talk about the fact that many of us are overweight and need to lose weight. At the same time, there are people who have emotional problems and neurotic body image problems that actually prevent them from eating healthy. You know, eating healthy is probably the best way to preserve your life. Now, I will tell you this, folks, while there is a genetic component to life, my wife's family lives into their late 90s. And when I was talking about my grandma, it's actually my wife's grandma. Her family lives into their 90s and half of them touch 100. My family, on the other hand, usually makes it into the late 70s, early to mid 80s. Now, the deal is my wife will probably outlive me because her genetic material is stronger, right? But there's a range of when you can die, and you would be surprised at how much your behavior can affect whether or not you live to the maximum of your lifespan, right? So maintaining a proper weight is really an important aspect of that. Now, your book talks about drugs. There's always a drugs chapter in the book. I'm not going to spend my time telling you what cocaine, marijuana, and all these things are. Do most of you have a general idea of what these drugs are? What I do want you to understand is that drugs come in many shapes and forms. And although we focus on how dangerous the illicit ones are, the illegal drugs are, legal drugs can be just as dangerous. Remember, and so really, and there's this weird dividing line. These drugs are legal, these drugs are illegal. I'll tell you, probably the health outcomes associated with marijuana aren't nearly as severe as the health outcomes associated with alcohol, but alcohol is legal, marijuana is illegal. There are drugs like MDMA and LSD, which were shown in the 50s and 60s to be useful for helping people in therapeutic situations. But because they distort people's sense of reality, the government decided that those drugs would be illegal. So, aren't some medicines made with exactly, and then you pseudoephedrine, yes. You know, kind of crazy. Pseudoephedrine, which is used for sinus congestions. I remember I used to have bad sinus headaches, and I got into the habit of taking lots of pseudoephedrine. You know, the I forget the name of the pill that I've got, but it was a sinus medicine. And I got to where the sinus medicine wouldn't work anymore, and I started taking a little more and a little more. And I went to the doctor to have figure out what was going on with my allergies. And when I told the doctor how long and how much I'd been taking the sinus medicine, the doctor said, "Oh, I think your big problem is you've developed a pseudoephedrine tolerance. If you stop taking the medicine, after a while, your sinus headaches will go away on their own." And lo and behold, David, Daughtry, that's actually what had happened. Trying to kill my sinus headaches. Now, I wasn't smoking meth, but the pseudoephedrine that can be turned into meth, the same drug, I had developed a tolerance for, a progressive decrease in my responsiveness to. And so, what I want you folks to understand is that there's weird dividing lines: culturally acceptable, culturally unacceptable, legal, illegal, and all of these lines are designed by politicians and cultural reformers or whatever. And some legal ones may be dangerous and some illegal ones may not be dangerous. What I want you to understand is the risks and how to assess the risks so that you can manage the risk. Drugs have been around. In fact, I had an office with an anthropologist who showed me a stone pipe that had been excavated. It was 10,000 years old, and there were cannabis seeds with it. So drugs have been around a long time. The key for you is to manage your risk. Okay, it took Advil. How's my brain hurt? So I stopped, right? It, actually Advil, is Advil ibuprofen? Ibuprofen, what is it? Which is the one that can cause your stomach to bleed? That's aspirin. If you take aspirin, it can cause your stomach to bleed. I remember when I played football as a kid, if you got hurt, they would give you the non-aspirin medicine because if you went back out on the football field and got hit, you could actually hemorrhage and bleed to death. But yes, so here's the deal. Understand some drugs have a physical dependence. Now, when you have the physical dependence, that's when you have the really bad withdrawals. Okay, and these are the persons that are coming off heroin, that are coming off meth. Sometimes we'll put these people in a detox center, and it takes them a week or so of shaking and vomiting and throwing up to get over it. Or I forget what's that drug they use to get you off of heroin. The clinics, the methadone clinics, or they may use methadone. Physical dependence is when your body actually needs it. Now, you can develop a physical dependence on narcotics, sedatives. Absolutely. Alcohol can have a physical dependence. If you are a real bad alcoholic and you quit cold turkey, it can actually be dangerous, fatal even. So physical dependence means your body's biochemistry has adjusted, needs it. Now we're going to differentiate that from psychological dependence, right? And if you look, some of these drugs are going to have psychological dependence and some of these are not going to have psychological dependence. So when you're thinking about these drugs, you sort of have to think about these risks. Now, an overdose is a toxic dose of a drug that can necessarily threaten one's life. Here's the way to think about, here's how they talk about how dangerous drugs are. In a really dangerous drug, the therapeutic dose, that is the amount that gets you high, is really close to the toxic dose that kills you. Okay, so for example, heroin, it turns out that heroin users have to be very careful with the amount of this drug that they use because the amount that gets you high is really close to the amount that can kill you. It's a very, very toxic drug. On the other hand, you can drink enough beer to kill your alcohol to kill yourself, but usually people get really drunk way before they reach that point. So the therapeutic dose isn't anywhere close to the toxic dose. So when you look at these where it says fatal overdose potential, what this tells you is how close are you coming to killing yourself just to get that high, so to speak. And there's actually a number which they can use. They can calculate ratios and sort of evaluate that. And it turns out that, like I said, your opioids, your heroines, those things are quite dangerous because they're very close to the toxic dose. Now, strangely enough, people who have bipolar will take lithium sometimes. And it turns out that lithium, the drug you use for bipolar, is very dangerous. It has a high fatal overdose potential. Actually, the amount that you need to get the effects on the person's bipolar is often close to the amount that causes a fatal overdose. And so when they use lithium, what they do is they start with small levels and they start incrementally creeping up to get the right level. But what I'm suggesting to you is that it can be a legal drug or it can be an illegal drug, but you really have to focus on sort of the fatal overdose potential and the physical dependence potential. I'm not going to, and you're going to have to focus on your family's genetic history. I'm not telling you to drink alcohol or not to drink alcohol. I just want you to know that it can be physically addictive, and that it can be physically addictive. I want to tell you that you can choose to do heroin, but it's highly addictive and it's also dangerous each and every time you didn't do that. So, again, just remember all the drugs in the world, whether they're legal or illegal, should be thought of this way. When you go to the doctor and they want to give you some medicine, think about these issues: physical dependence, psychological dependence, the overdose, right? And you have to sort of be a good consumer, because although we tell kids, don't do drugs, the first thing we do is send them to a doctor who gives them pharmaceutical pills, which may be just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. So drugs, manage your risk. Again, and the crazy thing is, I've lived long enough to see friends relapse back into illicit drug habits, and I've seen friends who have fallen into prescription medication traps accidentally because they've been trying to treat an injury. So be very, very careful and learn how to manage your risk with drugs. Okay. Now, sometimes when we do talk about substance abuse disorders, they will be treated. You folks are probably more familiar with this. How can I help someone if they have a dependency? Right. By trying to get them, wow, that's a hard question. I'm not an intervention specialist. Talking to people is what I do. Yeah, yeah, and I don't want to talk about my own story because I don't want to embarrass any other people. But yeah, I've been involved in trying to intervene a couple of times, and it's, yeah, you have to get the whole family, you have to get the whole group aware of what's going on. What I've found in my time, my experiences with this, is that these people who are having these problems know how to contain and manage impressions with different people, and they thrive on keeping as many people as possible ignorant as about what's going on. Difficult question, Dave. Difficult question, right? So, actually, substance abuse is a clinical disorder, and you can go to a clinical psychologist and see a therapist because you have a drug problem. So that is one of the problems that is listed in the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, the Handbook of Mental Illness, where they list all of the different types of psychological disorders. And typically, when you see somebody who has a substance abuse disorder, now people don't walk around with a sign that says, I'm a substance abuser. It's weird. In the times I've experienced, you see these people and you're not sure if what you're seeing is really what it is. But typically, if you see somebody that has to have whatever it is, and you know, there's a difference between having a beer and having to have a beer. And so that's sort of what you're going to see, is that the person's going to start to make excuses and build the world around that thing. You'll notice that they're going to be able to use it, they're going to use it compulsively. That is, they're not going to be able to stop when they use it. Now, I like to drink beer, but I know that this is not time to drink beer. I don't drink beer before class. Why? Because I'm not supposed to. A person with an alcohol problem can't stop it, so they compulsively use it. So if you're seeing them doing whatever it is in inappropriate situations that raise other people's eyes, then it starts to click. Maybe this person has a problem. If this person starts engaging and you see them doing stupid things when they're on this drug, then that's problematic. So typically, people who drink and drive, we already guess that the assumption is that typically when the court systems get you for a DUI, the first assumption is they make is that you have a drug and alcohol problem because you've done something very reckless under the influence of the drug, which is get behind a car. And then if you have friends that can't get things done, I knew a fellow that couldn't get things done because he had a business and his business started falling off because he got too focused on his cocaine use. And so what you're going to see is that they're going to have difficulty meeting these responsibilities. So when you look out and you look around and you try to ask yourself, is your friend having trouble? Are they having trouble getting through the day? Do they have to have it? Do they tell you they have to have it? Are they using it at inappropriate times where even people who should use it don't use it, right? Or can use it, don't use it, right? So if they're walking around drinking at 3 in the afternoon, if they're doing reckless and crazy things, and if they're not meeting their responsibilities, then you start to think about, maybe this person has a substance abuse disorder. Now, treatment is usually going to include behavioral therapy, and you may give the person. Sometimes they do use medication to help treat people who are suffering from drug and alcohol problems, which always seemed kind of odd to me that you're having a drug problem, so I'll give you another drug. But that is the case. Usually includes behavioral therapy. Now, research has come out recently suggesting that MDMA is very useful in treating people with severe alcoholism that doesn't respond to psychotherapy. And the idea has always been is that MDA and some of these psychedelics allow people to break down their barriers, their defenses, and to really confront the deep emotional scars that are often the triggers for this alcohol abuse. However, MDMA and psychedelics have long been illegal in the United States, even for research purposes. And so a lot of the research that you've seen has been done internationally. And now I think the FDA has actually even approved MDMA to be used in conjunction with psychotherapy to help treat people with some of these more deep-seated drug-related dependencies. All right. Now, another thing, David, you talked a little bit about how do I help someone? If they have a dependency? Your book's going to talk about different kinds of family therapies. In chapter, I forget what chapter, 16, they're going to talk about strategic family therapy. Now, group therapy, there are lots of different types of group therapy. And group therapy is simply talk therapy, but I'm going to have a bunch of people in. One form of group therapy is like what you might see at an AA or an NA meeting, where everybody's going through the same problem. And so as we each talk about our challenges and our victories, the other people can develop insight from what we're dealing with. That's sort of a form of groups therapy. Another form of group therapy is what we might call family therapy, which is where we just bring the family in and we talk about issues. Well, dad's overbearing and doesn't listen to the kids. Mom does this, the children feel this and this, and that's sort of what we might call structural family therapy, where you just try to work out the general kinks in the family. But occasionally, what we'll do is we'll bring the family together as a unit when one of us is struggling in an attempt to help that person. So let's say if I had a family member who was suffering from the dependency, I would want to get the people they're living with, our mom, our dad, and we all get together and we talk about this issue as a group. Now, does drug therapy work? as good as any other therapeutic approaches. The bummer right now, the truth of psychotherapy and drug therapy and treating psychological disorders and problems is we're not very good at it right now. Our solutions don't have great efficacy. If you break your leg, I can put a cast on it and your leg will come back to new 99.9 times out of 100. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that with psychological problems. Um, but but we do know that if we do it a little bit longer, it tends to help people. And most people who have drug and alcohol problems are going to have a constellation of other problems too. You can't get me sober if I don't have a job or a place to live. It's not going to work. You're going to have to work on the whole person. And I think that's why we use the strategic family therapy. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Physical impacts. Regular exercise, turns out it has very serious physical consequences. Lower rates of cancer, lower blood pressure, reductions in heart disease, and a longer life. I promise you, getting into aerobic exercise and doing it for 6 months cured all kind of physiological biomarkers in me. Like I said, my cholesterol went down, my blood sugar went down, my blood pressure went down, my heart rate went down, all of this because I started engaging in cardiovascular exercise. Regular exercise, especially aerobic exercise, improves cognitive ability in older adults. One of the things that's going to happen as you get older is you're going to lose mental acuity. If you want to slow that down, you need to get yourself exercising. Now, I can't guarantee you that you're not going to develop Alzheimer's. However, we do know that the incidence rates seem to be lower for those people who exercise. And you know what? It's actually going to make your memory, you're just going to be a sharper, older person. And I'm sure I don't have to tell any of you who exercise, especially you, Nelisa, the power lifter, regular exercise is associated with improved emotional function because you get that dopamine and that serotonin and the endorphins. You get those rush of hormones when you lift weights or when you work out really hard. And so, and dopamine is part of the reward system. So it just really sort of helps your overall mental functioning. And you know what? Honestly, I know you might want to be like Nelisa and be a profound bodybuilder and work out hours a day. But seriously, 10 to 15 minutes of vigorous exercise every day. Go for a walk every day. Go for a walk every day. Half an hour walk. Take 30 minutes. Pop your iPods in. Listen to a fun show. Get a podcast or watch Netflix or something. I saw this lady on the treadmill the other day, and she brings a book. And she walks up a hill while reading a book, and she'll do it for 30, 45 minutes every day. You can study. You can multitask while you're walking on that treadmill. Get your butt into the gym. Smoking's awful. It's down now, but kids are vaping. And I do want you to know that there is a branch of psychology. Since we spend many hours of our life, in many years of our life in work, we do have a branch of, you might call them positive psychologists, but they're positive psychologists for business. So we call them industrial and organizational psychologists. And IO psychologists, as their nickname, IO, industrial organizational. And what these do is they look at how the work environment affects our productivity and our well-being. There you go. That's okay. Still do it, though. Do it as much as you can. And so, industrial psychology is probably more focused on how we identify, hire, and retain the best employees. Okay. And then organizational part of it is what are the best ways of managing a business that create the happiest and healthiest employees. And all of this is with an eye towards productivity and profits, okay? If you get the best employees and you keep them, you make more money. If you have better relationships, better organizational structure where your employees can stay happy, you make more money, right? And then there's human factor psychology, and that's the branch of psychology that says how should we design objects so that people can and will use them. And you see this picture right underneath here. How do we make a computer screen? How big can the phone get before it's too big and people won't use it anymore? How do we organize the buttons on our cell phone so that people are happy? You remember when they got rid of the circle button on the iPhone and they got rid of that and they said we're not going to use that anymore, and everybody was like, oh my God, the little circle button at the bottom of my iPhone, what am I going to do? A lot of thought went into whether or not this is going to hamper people's ability to use this particular tool. So, along with not smoking, drinking, and all of these, what we might call home stuff, home life well-being, there's a branch of psychology, IO, which helps businesses hire and retain better employees and make more money. And honestly, if you want to make money in psychology, if you want to get a PhD in psychology and make money, you do clinical psychology or you do IO psychology. You work for a big business, Google, or one of those companies, you'll make a fortune. Okay, I am going to get out of here and go now. My phone's blowing up. My mom and dad, I'm trying to get over there to repair their heating and air conditioning today, and they're blowing my phone up. I'm sitting here watching it, and it's ruining my lecture. But got to take care of that stuff. Hey, folks, thank you very much for coming today. I hope to see you in our next lecture where we'll talk specifically about stress, what it can do to you, and how you can avoid it. Otherwise, have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye.